Did you know that the head of the Department of Education is Arne Duncan, who is a sociologist? He's not an educator. To me, the English language arts reading materials look like social engineering, teaching our kids what to think through non-classical reading, full of immoral and abusive behaviors, devoid of hope and goodness. The general message seems to be nothing is true, everything is permissible. I think it is designed to pervert our children's minds against family values, the very families they come from. If your child is a junior in Naples in an English 3 class, they will be reading Florida Collections. This is an interesting book. It goes really well with the history that they're learning. In this book, every other story is a victim story. Balboa, victimizing the Indians. Mexican immigrants, victim of the American culture. Indian culture, victimized by Europeans. A victim of the American-Japanese internment camp. Women who feel victimized by the American system. Chinese victims of the American capitalism and the Transcontinental Railroad. Victims of big business. A woman victimized by her husband. And victims of the wealthy in America. And the last story is interesting because it tells of the disappearance of the Easter Islanders and the Mayans. Did you know those populations were the victims of the human destructive force in the world of climate change and overpopulation? Some people will say the founding documents are in that book, but you know what? Founding documents belong in history when you've got your history cap on. Literature, stories belong in English. Let me give you some more examples. At Gulf Coast High School in AP English, the syllabus requires the kids to read Angela's Ashes, which includes marital infidelity, abandonment, promiscuity, and masturbation. Then they are required to read this article called Shitty First Drafts, and a story called Bullet in the Brain, about a man's last thoughts as a bullet enters his brain during a bank robbery. Then they read Body Rituals Among the Nasrima Indians, which discuss sadism, masochism, and customs concerning intercourse. In the Prentice Hall Reader, there's a story about how taking your husband's last name is degrading, and an article describing the medical harvesting of organs from someone whose heart is still beating. In AP Lit, The Women of Brewster Place contains prostitution, a lesbian relationship, and a gang rape. In Honors English 4, they're reading The Awakening. Now that's where a woman abandons her family, awakened by her passions for another man in a theme of self-discovery. However, when the affair is over, she chooses suicide over the prospect of returning to her waiting family. Suicide viewed here as freeing. Up until this year, The Bluest Eye and Clockwork Orange were on our reading list. The Bluest Eye contained graphic incest between father and daughter, and Clockwork Orange is a book containing severe brutality and pornography, among other things. I'm glad these books have finally been removed from our list, but how can we trust the people who put them there in the first place? Now, this is why we parents need to have a primary role. We know there are some teachers and educators out there who will scream, book banning, censorship, so un-American. Well, we rate video games for children. We rate movies so we know what's appropriate for children. To make sure that our children are not being immersed in material that is age inappropriate and in direct opposition to parents' values, damaging our kids, we parents have to have a foremost seat at this table where the curriculum materials are picked for our children whom we are responsible for and whom we are the experts on because we are forming the whole person. We moved here a year ago to Collier County, and I started seeing things coming home from the school that I found very alarming. I talked to the teacher. I talked to the principal. They didn't see anything wrong with these things. I got on the SAC committee. I brought it to the attention of the high school. I brought it to the attention of the school board. And the school board, very, very graciously, last year had Paul Holloman, who was Collier Schools Coordinator of Secondary Literacy last year. They had him send me a letter in response to my concerns. And his answer was to quote an expert who he admires, Dr. Stowe. And the quote is, Many critics believe modern literature to be culturally pernicious as well as inferior and a clear and present danger to readers less sophisticated. But what all popular writers know is that the burden of any system of morality finally becomes irksome even to its most sincere advocates, since it represses certain undying primal impulses which, however outmoded by civilization, need to be expressed. We cannot shortchange our children by eliminating good literature. There's a deep purpose to good literature. This book is nearly devoid of classic literature. The classic literature I'm speaking about is literature that's over 100 years old. Literature that is over 100 years old has a metaphysical background, which is more reflective of true human nature. The nature of we are creatures created by a supreme being, and depending on how we treat each other and honor that being, will dictate how our life moves forward and maybe what happens after life. These stories have virtue and its opposite, and they instruct and inspire. Literature is so very important for the development of young minds and hearts. I had a discussion with an English teacher about the difference between the older literature with the metaphysical background and the newer literature that is about brokenness, degradation, suicide, violence, hopelessness, despair. And she said it reflects what the kids are going through and it helps them because they know they're not alone. And I don't agree. David Copperfield is one of the old classics, and that boy had many things to overcome. But what you learn is, how do you overcome the human condition? What choices lead to a happy life, a full life, a successful life, and what choices don't? All those old classics have redeeming features as well as tragic features, but it's a balance where children can learn what human nature is about, and they can ruminate about what kind of life they would like to have. It's a template for living and developing views on how to make good choices and what leads to happiness and success. Here they can get answers to many of their questions. Who am I? What's life about? Why am I here? Where am I going? What do I need to do to be happy? And after all, what is the primary goal of education? Is it to get to college, to get a good job, to get a lot of information, to be a producer? I say no. I say it's to learn the truth, to learn to think, and to bring beauty and joy to life, and to develop as human beings, to develop an awareness of ourselves and others in our community, and what makes life worth living. It needs to include hope and goodness and a roadmap for human life. Otherwise, I don't understand what the point of literature is, unless it's to spoil the goodness that's already there. Thank you.